You're listening to Upgrade Your Health and Wellbeing podcast. Take care of your health and change your habits for the better.
Welcome to the podcast.
Upgrade Your Health and Wellbeing.
My name is Mariusz Borkowski.
My name is Arkadiusz Badziński.
And today we're going to tell you about microplastics.
All the things related to microplastics, what they are, the dangers, the risks, hazards, and so on and so forth.
Tell me, Arek, what are microplastics?
Microplastics are tiny particles that penetrate the tissue as such, different cells that generally are recognized as a very, not only potential, but real hazard as far as our health is concerned. Since we need to bear in mind the fact that plastics, microplastics, are omnipresent, and it's impossible, absolutely impossible to avoid microplastics. The thing is that we need to get to know how to live with them, how to omit, how to avoid certain risks related.
So where do we find them in our daily lives? You mentioned cosmetics, but what about water?
Of course, microplastic is available, is found in water. Therefore, we need to pay special attention what we drink. As far as drinking is concerned, we need to keep in mind that we ought to definitely avoid plastic bottles with mineral water. Plastic from these bottles is particularly toxic since it penetrates, we can say, almost each and every tissue in our organism, ranging from brain tissue to even testicular tissue.
Tell me, I've always had a habit of heating products in the microwave, and I never took them out of the plastic packaging. I guess that means I was making a mistake.
Absolutely. It's a typical classic mistake that we should avoid, right? I will put it that way. We definitely need to replace microplastics or plastic as such. I would rather suggest using ceramic items, or metal boxes, but definitely not microplastic containers.
I'll tell you, I'm not the man who cooks the most or the most often in the world, but it does happen.
I don't go for cooking either.
I most often make scrambled eggs in the morning. Tell me, I use a Teflon pan for that. I guess that's also a mistake, right?
Definitely. That should be replaced. What we need to bear in mind is the fact that sometimes we are absolutely unaware of potential risks and hazards that are related to the very kitchen of ours, especially in terms of kitchen utensils.
I also often make use of bottled water in my daily routine, but I have a glass bottle, I must tell you. And I also travel a lot, and I wanted to point out to our listeners that at most airports, and actually I think it should be a rule that at every airport you can refill that bottle. So I use a glass one for that very reason.
Definitely a very good idea. What I'd like to focus on, and I believe this is of crucial importance, is the fact that microplastics are responsible for a number of diseases. We shall start with autoimmune diseases. All right, this is the first thing that we should bear in mind. Then we go for increased oxidative stress. As we know, oxidative stress is responsible for many different conditions, since oxidative stress is potentially or can be potentially highly toxic. Then we have abnormal immune activation. This is particularly and closely related to autoimmune diseases. But what is of crucial importance as far as women are concerned, for instance, is the fact of accelerated aging process.
I have to say that for me, it's also a big surprise that, and we'll add this to the earlier part, that microplastics are also present in tap water.
As I said, this is absolutely impossible to avoid microplastics 100%. What we need to focus on is just to eliminate as much as possible.
Although I have to tell you all that I live in Warsaw, and in Warsaw the tap water is even better than bottled water. So by the way, use tap water if you live in Warsaw, of course. It's probably similar in other cities.
Mariusz, one more thing. Fertility issues have become a serious problem nowadays. If we look at fertility problems from the perspective of microplastics, It's a huge topic for discussion. First of all, we need to focus on the very fact that microplastics are responsible for sperm disorders, motility, and generally fertility as far as guys are concerned. But also, in case of females, the microplastics are responsible for problems, gynecological problems, for instance, since bisphenol A is responsible for a plethora of different toxic activities in the body, since it mimics estrogens. Mariusz, one more thing, importantly, cosmetic microplastics can contribute to allergic reactions, even autoimmune related reactions, skin irritation. This is particularly true in case of different types of cosmetics, starting from sunscreens, then with the attention being paid to makeup stuff, but just ordinary creams that contain or that may contain a lot of microplastics.
Well, I would have never said that microplastics are such a big problem and that they're basically found everywhere. Arek, in preparing for this program of ours, I know you conducted a lot of thorough scientific research. Please tell me, what clinical studies and what journals did you use?
First of all, one of the most prominent, obviously, JAMA, New England, as such, right? These are two most representative journals. We need to bear in mind that generally microplastics penetrate each and every cell, and there are many clinical trials that focus on the effect of microplastics as far as lungs, liver, feces, breast milk, testicles are concerned. So in fact, if you try to do some research on that, you will come across the situation in which you find a large number of studies confirming the toxic, not potentially toxic, but in fact toxic effects of microplastics on our health.
And you all have access to these clinical studies because at the end of the podcast, in the notes, we always provide links to the sources we used.
Okay, so now it's my turn to ask you some questions. First of all, since you are a doctor, practitioner, tell me from your perspective and on the basis of some clinical data, how or what is the best method to avoid or generally get rid of the very microplastics?
I have to tell you, it's incredibly difficult because the plastic that we have in our world in general, there was a study that said that since 1907, only 9% of the plastic that we produced right at the beginning of the 20th century has been eliminated. It just seems incredible.
But I told you it's omnipresent.
However, what can we do as people? First, action on a global level, limiting further plastic production. And secondly, on an individual level, when we use things, whether it's toothbrushes or any other items we buy, let's think twice before choosing the ones that simply have some plastic components in them. Secondly, let's remember that good sleep, which we'll be talking about, because our podcasts are also about well-being, longevity, and I think biohacking as well. So with that in mind, let's remember that good sleep, long sleep, but also good quality sleep allows us to cleanse our bodies simply through rest and the process of autophagy.
Well, and that's what I would like to ask about, because generally the recent very hot issue is the fact of fasting, intermittent fasting, and fasting in general. So can you share with us some info as far as this subject is concerned?
I have to tell you that I use these pauses in eating, but let's remember that it's not for everyone. I think we should also dedicate an episode to this.
I go for that as well. My break is 19 hours.
We have to remember that it's not that straightforward because with certain illnesses we shouldn't use these breaks. But from the perspective of microplastics, these pauses in eating are very beneficial. Studies also say that even 18 hours, which activates the process of autophagy, is very beneficial for cleansing our bodies of microplastics. Of course, let's not do this every day. Once a week or once a month is the right practice just to take some action regarding microplastics.
Yeah, this process is very crucial for getting rid of waste or generally like debris, we might say, right? But one more thing that we should focus on is also the fact of limiting certain plastic tea bags, because this is like an ordinary activity at home in the kitchen, right? We do not pay attention to that because it's just a routine activity, but we need to focus on very, in a way, trivial things such as making tea. So we ought to limit tea bags. We should not pour hot liquids into plastic cups or bottles.
I wanted to say that when we have patients from the United States and they come to Poland, to Europe, to the European Union, they are surprised why, when going to a grocery store, their products are not packed directly into plastic bags or by an employee, but instead we do it ourselves. That's because in the European Union you have to pay a small fee, but we have to pay it regardless of how much we spent on our shopping, specifically for a plastic bag or any other kind of bag, precisely to discourage people from using them. And I, on the other hand, encourage you to bring a non-plastic bag with you and simply go shopping with your own bag. In this way, even on an individual level, we are able to reduce the amount of plastic in our environment.
And to conclude, we need to bear in mind that this is absolutely impossible to eliminate microplastics in 100%. The point is to eliminate as much as possible, because we are surrounded. Microplastic, as I said, is omnipresent. So the point is to reduce as much as possible and generally have a high quality of life. Thank you very much for your attention. If you like the content, please subscribe.
Thank you very much.
Upgrade your health and well-being podcast. Take care of your health and change your habits for the better.